Hey everyone, it's Clint. Welcome to Sweetcast. We'll talk about the comic industry. Is it dying, or is that a little bit of hyperbole? I think the truth is it's actually a mischaracterization of what is happening, but I'm going to get into some of my reasons why. This is Comic Perch, and I'll point out the date here. This came out December 10th of 2018, so this is over 2 years ago. I realize people are still talking about the same kind of stuff, but for what it's worth, it's a little different. It was a couple of years ago. Comic Perch said, I hate that this needs to be posted, but here we go. The comic industry isn't dying. Sales aren't imploding. The most true thing about comics right now is that little has changed in the past 10 to 20 years, and that is a problem. Perch does have a YouTube channel as well where he talks about some of these things. My understanding is that he is a retailer, and so he has some insight and a nice perspective onto the industry. I'm going to add my own perspective on this and maybe pull in some other sources that might help shed a light on why everyone is talking about the dying comic book industry in the year 2020. We'll get into that. First, I want to let you know that Downcast Rise and Fall, the main campaign officially ended. That means we're really working on production, gearing things up. We already have a nice head start on this book as opposed to the first one, and so it's not going to be in the in-demand phase for nearly as long as the first one was. But if you haven't backed it yet, you still have some time to do so. The link is in the description below. We're at $31,518. Thank you very much, everybody who backed the project. All right, now the problems with the comic book industry are many. It's easy to really get stuck into one way of thinking, one lane of the problems with the comic book industry, and sort of have your blinders on and forget what else is going on, the larger picture. But I think it's important to look at those other things as well. One being, the comic book industry is also suffering from the same problems that every single brick and mortar retailer is suffering right now. There is a problem with retail. It is one of the industries that everybody is talking about how things are dying. It's being majorly disrupted by online sales, especially Amazon. Number two is that publishing in general, I'm not just talking about comic books, publishing in general is an extremely struggling industry. Truth is, there are still a ton of people reading books. They're reading them digitally. They're going to libraries. In fact, libraries have also seen some kind of disruption because they have the digital library programs now, so you can rent things on your phone digitally, so it's even more easy to get books to read. And also, of course, there's Amazon. And so the publishing industry is really struggling. It has been struggling for a number of years now. That also affects the comic book industry. And last but not least, the comic book industry suffers from a lot of dead weight in how it is set up and how it's run. It is really held back by a lot of, like for example, the distribution model, which is a unique problem to comic books that you're not going to have for other kinds of publishing quite as much. And it makes it very difficult for the comic book market to be agile and to react to changes in the market. Last but not least, we're talking about the quality of the books, quality of people that work in comics. And I do think that those are actually symptoms of the things that I mentioned already. Having comic book creators that hate your guts and are willing to say so on the internet is terrible. It becomes this downward spiral because when you have professionals working in comics that don't know how to act on social media, it causes problems again with customers. Customers want to buy fewer books, and so on and so on and so on. I'm sure you could add more problems to the mix, but the truth is that the comic book industry has been disrupted. And right now it is ready to move into a new stage. And this new stage could be scary for some, especially if perhaps you're working in Diamond or if you're working at one of the major publishers. But it can also be a really exciting time if you see it for what it is, and that is a massive, major opportunity. From my outlook, technically, I'm not saying that the industry is dying. What I'm saying is it has been disrupted. Is it possible that DC Comics, especially with Dan DiDio, I mean, they never officially said that he got fired. I don't think anybody actually believes that he just decided to leave. Pretty well known that he was fired. He was let go from DC Comics. This has got a lot of people worried, a lot of people in speculation mode, and a lot of rumors moving. Is DC Comics going to stop publishing comics? Are they just going to stop, full stop? I don't think so. I think they're going to have to adjust to the new market. It's going to take some numbers of years for a new normal to set in. We're not quite at that stage yet, But, you know, if I'm to believe what everybody else is saying, sure, like I'll go along with that. It's going to change massively. Are comics going to stop being printed? There's not going to be any new comics. No, as long as there are people that are willing to spend money on comics, as long as there's demand for comics, there's going to be people, entrepreneurs, businesses that are going to reach out and meet that demand because there's profit to be made there. However, things are going to change massively, and I'm not going to make any specific predictions on timelines, but let me show you a few things. It's important to look at other industries and how they're dealing with change and how they're not dealing with change, because it helps shed light on the current situation that comics is in. Comics are not so unique that they're not dealing with all these same kinds of issues. They do have some little nuances that are unique, but at the end of the day, we're talking about publishing and retail. Not just retail, but an extreme dependency on brick and mortar retail, which it's awful in and of itself. Here's an interesting explanation for what's going on with retail.
These retailers are becoming showrooms. What do we need a showroom for? They're simply helping Amazon. You're going to Walmart, you're taking a picture, then you're going to Amazon, you're paying something 20% cheaper. Amazon is helping Walmart. Walmart is helping Amazon. Walmart has become Amazon's showroom. How pathetic is that?
Do you think that comic shops are much different? Let's be honest. I'm sure that happens quite often. I know that there's this attempt, and I think this is wrong. This is backward. This is not the way that things should work. But guilting people into supporting their local comic shop, like, you're a good person if you support your local comic shop. I mean, that's nice, and you're going to get a lot of loyal, faithful customers that are going to keep supporting their comic book shops. But that's not really enough to solve the problem. You got to find a way to compete in the market. And right now, Amazon, I know it. They are decimating the market for all retail, and that includes comic books. So how does the comic book industry adapt and compete in this market? Here's another one. Here's taxi drivers versus Uber drivers. Do you remember this little bit?
Traffic jams, travel chaos, stone throwing, and fistfights. In Paris, Marseille, and Lyon and other cities, airport entrances were blocked and expressways were shut down by burning tires. Travelers heading for flights sometimes had to walk hundreds of yards and more to access the air terminals.
These are symptoms of an industry that has been disrupted. Taxi drivers, everything was disrupted. It's not that there was no need to travel anymore, that there was no demand. It was that there was another way to cut costs on this and also make it more convenient, and that is called Uber. They're doing the same kind of thing. You'll hear the same thing happening with the hotel industry. And what's interesting to note is that it has moved from being more big business corporations that have all this dead weight to more cottage industry style business. They're basically their own boss. They're doing the thing. They run by the system, and it's also costing much less money for riders. And there's no wonder it disrupted the entire market. Now, I'm not going to pretend that comics is exactly the same to taxis. It is a little different. I don't think that the demand for transportation has really changed any. It's just that there was a competition on price. When it comes to comics, I feel like there are a few things going on. Competition to quality of comics is a big thing. And I think the more that you see cottage industry style comic book creators and small publishers doing their thing, and if they are competing on the quality of story, quality of art, and number of pages level that big publishers are, you're going to start seeing things move even more. We've already seen a lot of movement that direction. All right, so the last industry I want to look at, this is the music industry. And you'll remember people always say that the music industry is dying. Let's see here. This article, this was on newstatesmanamerica.com. I actually thought this was a really great article. The Lazarus Effect and how the music industry saved itself. Hear this sentence right at the beginning. Something is always killing music. You could change that to comics just as easily. Something is always killing comics. All right, so essentially this article went through the collapse of the music industry. And again, everybody listens to music. It's not that there's not demand for music. Is that there was a disruption in the market, and it all became because of the internet, because of Napster. And after Napster, it still came from Spotify. The entire landscape of music completely changed. The way that people digested music also completely changed. I feel like maybe I'm a bit of a boomer when it comes to this. I still like CDs, like physical CDs, not necessarily because there's a physical CD, but I like having the entire album. I feel like, I don't know, that's part of the listening process. I just like to listen to the album as a whole. That's not normal. It has become even less than normal. People want to pick and choose what kinds of music they want to listen to, and they want to curate their own playlists. Now, the music industry tried to push back against this, and that was one of the great things that I got from this article, is they actually said that the music industry was way too presumptuous. They were trying to tell the fans how they should consume music, even though those consumers already voted with their feet on how they wanted to consume music. And that was one song at a time. It was digitally. It was, having full control of the music. The music industry took way too long to adapt to this and recognize that they weren't going, the tail was not going to wag the dog. I think this is where a lot of industries go wrong. And I think this is where the comic book industry goes wrong in a very major way. And that is thinking that they control the industry. They do not. Consumers control the industry, and the moment that consumers are shown a better way, they will move, and the entire industry will either adapt to it or it will die off, and new pieces will grow. It'll have to morph into something else. And those people that are willing to be agile and change and follow the market, follow the consumers, and give them what they want, those are going to be the people on top. All right, so I like this section. It's called The New Art of the Hustle. Things have changed completely. This is where the music industry, because of all the disruption, it actually created new opportunities for the cottage industry. So you had people, they had all of technology to record themselves. They could record their own records. And if they could figure out how to market themselves, they didn't need the industry. They didn't need a major label because they were doing it themselves. Now, major labels have to conform to those individual musicians that are able to do their thing. They're able to make the machine go. So now these big industries, and I think of it as publishers are going to have to find out how to cater to the people that are able to sell product. That's how things are going to move, whether Marvel or DC want to or not. They're going to have to find a way to basically harness that power. That's how it works in every single industry. Nothing you do is going to make this change. All right, here's an interesting, this is a partner, Brian Message, that's his last name. He said, nowadays, my role is not trying to get an artist signed to a label. It's about developing their whole business in a more entrepreneurial way. We're across things we never used to be, like marketing, promotion, selling music, direct to consumers, VIP packages, the whole shooting match. You hear that? That sounds like a possible idea for somebody working in the comic book industry. I often hear this a lot, and that'll be that there's somebody that's a fantastic artist or a fantastic writer. They can do comics, but they can't do the whole marketing angle. If you are really good at the marketing angle, you could absolutely be some kind of a consultant, some kind of a manager in this role, and you could help make the marketing happen or make the connections happen. If somebody figured that out, that's actually a niche that could explode. Just my 2 cents. And it's honestly, it's just based off the music industry. They're doing the same thing, and that works. Okay, the next thing is choice and deals. Again, comics are still going to be made. There's still going to be people that want to buy comics. I still want to buy comics. It's still going to be a thing, just not how we know it. Here's another pretty good quote. For artists and managers who've been around the block like Nick, we've got much more choices. You can sign to a label, you can do a label service deal, release it yourself, strike a partnership with promoters. It's a huge change in the landscape. I love that this is here because this sort of just reaffirms to me that signing with Alterna Comics was a good strategy for me. One, because a lot of the stuff I'm reading here, being able to own your music still in the music industry has now become a nice thing for artists, where it didn't happen all that often in the past. I own Downcast, for example. It is mine. I own it. But I've also got a deal with Alterna Comics. And it's, kind of, if you think about it, a little bit of an a la carte kind of thing. Alterna Comics is going to be publishing single issue floppies in newsprint. I'm publishing the graphic novel. I've got the options and the choices to do that. This is not so different from what the music industry is doing. In fact, I think it's kind of eerily the same. All right, this is another interesting aspect, and that is live performances. Live performances have suddenly become a cash cow for music artists, because you can charge much higher prices, you can make a lot of money. People want to go to concerts because they want the experience. They're okay with paying higher prices because that's kind of part of the experience. You're buying something unique and special. Think about that a little bit. Is that different from crowdfunding? Maybe a little, but I think there's still a lot of similarities that are going on here, and probably more that could be utilized. Now, music artists are not making the kind of money that they used to, just selling their actual songs to regular people. Streaming is so cheap. They had to figure out how they were going to make money, how they were going to monetize their music, because there's still demand for their music. People still want the music. They just have to figure out how they're going to make money from it. I don't think that comics are all that different. People still want to read comics. You got to make something that they want, a unique, nice kind of thing, and find out how you're going to make money from it. Okay, the other interesting thing here is that with streaming services, there used to be a lot of pushback. I didn't think about this a lot, but it particularly talks about Radiohead here. But they took off their music from Spotify because they weren't making very much money. $1,700 after tax. This is pounds, British, I don't know, euros. Doesn't sound like a lot of money though for 34 million streams of their music. This was a big deal, a lot of pushback, but now things have changed. You don't really hear complaints about the streaming services being so cheap. That is because they actually pay you something instead of it being free music. And also it's just this acceptance of the change of the market. The market has been disrupted. Things have changed. So now you have a new landscape to work from. The interesting thing though with now in comics is that we don't have that new normal. The disruption is still in process, and I think especially this year there's going to be even more disruption. Finding that new normal and finding it first, for whoever does it, is going to be really, really rewarded for doing that. Okay, last section here. This is, again, same article, doing it for themselves. And they exactly talk about figuring out how social media works, making it a cottage industry. You don't have to do more than that. But that is an interesting thing about the times that we live in right now, is that there's such a diversity of things on the internet, diversity of music. You can really dial in and find something that you really want, something unique. And it might never have to touch a major record label at all. Comics are no different. All right, so here's a great quote from Elizabeth Burnshold. It gets more complex every year. She says, the music industry is maybe 10 to 20% of what I do. She continues, I spend most of my time on admin. I have a team, but even so, it can be overwhelming. It's very low paid, but the control can be rewarding too. If you can compromise and adjust your lifestyle and make it work, but it's hard. Okay, so yeah, again, this is sort of moving into the whole cottage industry component of music. And I can definitely agree to that. I think I spend less than 10% of my time and effort on actually the creative part of making comics, and so much more of it on all of the other stuff and making the publishing happen and promoting it and all that other good stuff. And so that works. I'm not going to say that it works for everybody, not at all, but I think it can work. All right, I think that'll do it now. Anyway, my point is, the comic industry, is it dying? I don't think dying is the right word. I think disruption is the right word. Will you still be able to buy and sell comics? Yes, of course you will. Is your brick and mortar comic book shop going to be around forever? I don't think so. I really don't. I think it's going to change. I'm not going to say this year, but I think it's going to change eventually. And that's just because everything is changing. Brick and mortar is extremely expensive. It's been around forever. I'm not just talking about comics, everywhere. It's extremely expensive. There are disruptions to the market. And the more that you get creators realizing that they don't need these massive publishers with all of the dead weight that they carry, they can just move out and do their own thing. Once you start seeing competition when it comes to characters that everybody wants to read about, and those move away from large publishers and more the focus move directly toward creators are going to get exactly what they want to get, and that is paid better. Fans are going to determine how it is that they want to consume those comics and where those changes are going to be. And publishers are going to have to figure out how they can adapt to the new market changes, how they're going to help it grow and adapt, or they're going to be left in the dust. They're going to be left behind. So thanks for watching. I hope this all made sense. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Am I totally up in the night? I've got no idea what I'm talking about. Did I miss something big and important? And if you back downcast, rise and fall, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I will see you in the next video.